Brian, thanks for joining us here today. And congratulations, you were the winningest coach percentage-wise in ACC history at 1-0. I'm guessing back in 2010, that was not something you envisioned playing as an ACC member.
Certainly not. But as you know, times have been quite interesting, and we're very grateful to the ACC for giving us this opportunity. Very unique, but one that we needed. Again, Commissioner Swafford was generous, and the coaches were generous enough to allow us to put a full schedule together and also to compete for an ACC championship.
Brian, I talked to Athletic Director Jack Swarbrick, and he told me back in 2010 when he was looking for a new coach, they wanted somebody to build the program, that the program was broken. That was his words. Looking back, did you initially realize how difficult an undertaking you had inherited?
Probably in the first few months, I knew that this was going to be a long, challenging process. Look, I was like many, right? I grew up as an Irish Catholic that, knew of only Notre Dame football and its tradition and long-standing success. But, it had fallen on some tough times and maybe, quite frankly, had fallen behind times a little bit. And you don't know until you go and work from the inside out. And now that I was in that position to work from the inside out, there were a lot of things that needed to be attended to. And a lot of it had to do with addressing the needs for the student athletes and providing them the resources necessary to compete in a very, very difficult academic environment, and one that now had changed. The landscape of college football had changed dramatically since the days of Ara Parseghian and Lou Holtz. So many more college football teams had invested heavily in wanting to be successful. And Notre Dame, quite frankly, may have, slipped a little bit in that investment. So this investment was in the student athlete.
Brian, you have a tremendous talent at quarterback in Ian Book, and you've had some really good quarterbacks in your 30 years as a coach at all the levels. Where does Ian stack up, and how does he separate from the rest of those guys?
Well, Ian is as talented mechanically, has all of the tools, the ability to make all the throws. I think his ability to move to the elite category is probably in his just the mental performance. Each year he's obviously gotten better in terms of the numbers. And over 30 touchdown passes last year, over 500 yards rushing. There were only a couple of quarterbacks, I think, in the country that matched those numbers. But I just think it's each year, it's the mental performance, the guys that really start to separate themselves, handle all of the elements. This year, he's got 6 new skill players that he has to bring into the offense. And I think what he found in the first week is that maybe he tried to do a little bit too much. And now he has to really let those guys develop. He's got a great offensive line. We can rely on that. We've got a very good running game, and let those kids mature. So I think just the mental performance, I think that's the area that he'll continue to grow in, and I think move forward week in and week out.
You've said your mission at Notre Dame is to win a national championship. How does this team compare with the 2012 and 2018 national contending teams?
Well, we're further along than the 12 team. We're further along defensively in terms of team speed, athleticism, physicality, all the measurables when you look at a team that can compete for a championship. We're not in that same category as we were in 12. The 18 team had some elite players, as this team does. I think the separator is probably, at the quarterback position right now, and probably defensively in terms of depth on the defensive line. We played 11 defensive players in the front 7, and all of them are guys that can make plays on the defensive side of the ball. So I would say the continuation of building depth on defense, speed, athleticism on defense, And then we finally have found a guy that can break the game open at the running back position. And we had struggled with that over the past few years. I think we're getting close to finding that guy.
Because of Notre Dame's higher academic standards, how challenging is it to recruit against other elite programs that, quite frankly, don't have the same restrictions?
Well, I mean, there's a double-edged sword here, right? I mean, there are some kids that after 30 years that are, for me, guys that I would prefer not to coach. And so what does that mean? Not that they're bad kids, but I would prefer to coach young men that understand and value a degree and understand that football someday will end, and that they have a degree from a great university like Notre Dame. So those are the kids that I would prefer to coach after 30 years of being in this business. So, and again, I want to emphasize, that doesn't mean that the kids that we don't recruit are not good kids, but they don't recognize that there is something more than just playing this game of football in college. Some just want to go to college and play football and go on in the NFL, and that's fine. I get that. But we can't recruit those guys to Notre Dame.
Brian, you've had multiple opportunities, both college and the NFL, to leave. Recently, you signed your contract extension through 2024. Why was that important? And will you end your career, you think, with the Irish?
Well, yes. I mean, look, when you've been doing it in the college ranks for so long, where you get to make the decisions on who's on your roster, who gets paid, relative to a scholarship, that kind of centralized control is hard to give up when you go to the NFL. There's only a few coaches that have that autonomy in a sense of, controlling the roster, making decisions on, who gets paid what. And so, after being in it for 30 years, to give up that kind of centralized control, I just couldn't envision myself doing that. And here at Notre Dame, it's still driven by the fact that our mission is to graduate all of our players and win a championship. And I do believe we can win a championship. And so that's why I agreed to the contract extension, because I do believe that we can win a national championship. So we're working towards that end. I believe we're closing that gap that was there when I got here. And we're going to work towards getting there before this contract expires.
Will you finish your career with the Irish, you think, your coaching career?
Yeah, as long as I, keep my mouth shut and, coach football and do all the right things. Yeah, this is where I want to be. We're building a house right down the street. We got a view of the Golden Dome. And believe me, the property prices are really high around here. So I'm going to have a really nice mortgage payment too. So I expect to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.